Welcome to African Mafia Stories, where loyalty is currency, power has a price, and every city hides a secret. Today's story is based in Senegal. Enjoy!
Dakar woke beneath a sky the color of burnished steel, the Atlantic pressing against the city with the restless patience of something that had been waiting centuries to be heard. Awa Diop stood on the upper balcony of the old customs building at the Port of Dakar, watching cranes swing containers from cargo ships onto the docks below. From that height, everything appeared orderly. Trucks moved through marked lanes. Security officers checked manifests. Dockworkers shouted over engines and grinding metal. Ships arrived, unloaded, and departed according to schedules printed weeks in advance. But ports lied beautifully. They created the illusion that everything entering a country had been counted. Awa knew better. She tightened her grip on the folder beneath her arm and descended the narrow staircase toward the inspection bay. At 34, she had spent almost a decade investigating maritime insurance claims, cargo fraud, and damaged freight. Most people thought her work involved missing televisions and spoiled shipments of rice. They imagined paperwork, signatures, and polite disputes between shipping companies. They did not imagine blood. The container waiting in Bay 6 had arrived from Marseille 3 days earlier. According to the manifest, it carried restoration equipment for museums and galleries, climate control units, archival storage boxes, specialist lighting systems. The paperwork was flawless. That was the first thing Awa distrusted. Perfect documents usually meant someone had worked very hard to hide an imperfect truth. A customs officer named Mamadou unlocked the container while two armed port security men watched from several meters away. The metal doors opened with a long groan. Warm, trapped air escaped into the morning. Inside, wooden crates stood in disciplined rows. Awa stepped closer. Nothing was removed, she asked. Not since it was flagged, Mamadou said. The seal was intact. Who flagged it? He hesitated. Awa looked at him. Mamadou lowered his voice. A junior officer noticed the declared weight did not match the scale reading. Where is he? He did not report for work today. The harbor noise seemed to shift around them. Awa turned toward him fully. Did anyone call him? His phone is off. She looked back into the container. The folder beneath her arm suddenly felt heavier. She entered carefully, running her fingers over the first crate. Each one bore the name of a respected cultural foundation based in Dakar. A foundation known for funding exhibitions, restoring historic buildings, and sponsoring young Senegalese artists. Its founder was Marième Fall. Even people who cared nothing for art knew her name. Marième owned hotels, galleries, warehouses, and a controlling interest in one of the largest logistics companies in West Africa. Newspapers called her a patron of African culture. Politicians called her a friend. Foreign collectors called her indispensable. Dockworkers called her something else. The woman who owned the harbor. Awa had always dismissed the nickname as exaggeration. Standing inside that container, she began to reconsider. She selected one crate near the back and checked the inventory code. The manifest described its contents as a humidity control cabinet. Yet the wood showed none of the reinforcement normally required for heavy machinery. Open this one, she said. Mamadou glanced toward the security officers. Madame Diop, perhaps we should wait for the foundation's representative. No. They have already been informed. Awa's eyes narrowed. By whom? Before he could answer, a dark vehicle stopped outside the inspection bay. The rear door opened. The man who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a charcoal suit that belonged in a boardroom rather than a port. He moved with the self-possession of someone accustomed to being watched and entirely untroubled by it. Awa recognized him immediately. Idrissa Kane. Former naval officer. Current head of security for the Fall Cultural Foundation. There were rumors about why he had left the Navy, although no two versions agreed. Some said he had disobeyed an admiral. Others claimed he had exposed a smuggling operation connected to senior officials. A third version, whispered most often, suggested he had killed a man during an unofficial mission and refused to apologize for it. He walked toward her with steady, unhurried steps. For one deeply inconvenient moment, Awa forgot the container. She had seen photographs of Idrissa before, usually standing behind Marième at public events, silent and watchful. The photographs had not captured the unsettling calm in his face or the directness of his gaze. Nor had they prepared her for the sharp awareness that passed through her when his eyes settled on hers. It was not admiration. It was recognition without familiarity. The sense that this man would become a problem before he had spoken a single word. "Madame Diop," he said. His voice was low, precise. "Monsieur Kane." His gaze moved briefly to the crate she had selected. "You have not opened anything yet." That sounds less like a question than a hope. Something almost amused flickered in his expression. "You are thorough," he said. "I am paid to be. And difficult. That is free." His eyes held hers for a second longer than necessary. The air between them tightened. Awa disliked that she noticed the small scar near his jaw. She disliked even more that he noticed her noticing it. Idrissa stepped into the container. The space immediately felt smaller. "The Foundation has requested that the inspection be postponed until our legal representative arrives," he said. "The Foundation does not determine customs procedure." "No. But accusations made without evidence can damage reputations." Awa moved closer to the crate, forcing him either to retreat or stand within arm's reach. He did not retreat. "I have not made an accusation," she said. "I have identified a discrepancy. Which may have an innocent explanation. Most innocent explanations do not make junior customs officers disappear." The amusement left his face. "You believe he has disappeared? His phone is off. He missed work. He flagged this shipment." Idrissa looked toward Mamadou, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. Awa studied him. The reaction was controlled, but real. He had not known. That mattered. Perhaps Idrissa Kane was not here to protect the shipment. Perhaps he was here because someone else feared what it contained. "Open it," Awa said. Mamadou retrieved the crowbar. Idrissa remained beside her as the lid was forced loose. Nails protested. Wood splintered. The top panel lifted. No humidity control cabinet waited inside. Beneath layers of foam lay a framed painting wrapped in protective cloth. Awa removed the covering carefully. A portrait emerged. An elderly Senegalese woman sat beneath a baobab tree, her white headscarf luminous against a dark background. The brushwork was unmistakable. So was the signature in the lower corner. The painting had vanished from a private collection in Paris 11 years earlier. It was worth several million euros. Mamadou swore under his breath. Awa stared at the portrait. One stolen painting could be explained as fraud. A container full of crates suggested an industry. Behind her, Idrissa had become very still. "You knew nothing about this," she said. It was not quite a question. His jaw tightened. "No. Do you expect me to believe that?" He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze changed. The Polish security executive vanished. For a moment, she saw the naval officer beneath the suit. "You should not believe anyone yet," he said quietly. Footsteps sounded outside the container. Several men entered the inspection bay wearing port security uniforms. Idrissa turned toward them. Awa felt the shift in him before she understood it. His shoulders changed. His weight moved slightly forward. The first man reached beneath his jacket. Idrissa caught Awa around the waist and pulled her behind the nearest crate as the gunshot shattered the morning. wood exploded above them. Awa hit the floor against his chest, his arm locked around her, his body shielding hers. She could feel the force of his breathing, the hard line of him against her back, the heat of his hand spread across her side. For one breath, danger and attraction became indistinguishable. Then another bullet struck the crate. Idrissa drew a pistol from beneath his jacket. "You still think I came to stop the inspection?" he asked. Awa looked toward the stolen painting lying exposed in the broken crate. "No," she said. Outside, the gunman advanced. Idrissa's eyes met hers. "Good," he said. "Because whoever owns that shipment has just decided we both know too much." The third shot struck the crate with enough force to shower splinters across the container. Idrissa fired twice in quick succession. The attackers disappeared behind stacks of cargo, and the return fire stopped almost as abruptly as it had begun. Outside, alarms echoed across the inspection yard. Dockworkers scattered in every direction while forklifts screeched to a halt, abandoned in the middle of narrow lanes. "Stay behind me," Awa almost objected out of instinct. Instead, she caught herself. Whoever had opened fire had done so within one of the busiest and most heavily monitored ports in West Africa. That meant either astonishing confidence or astonishing influence. Neither possibility reassured her. Idrissa eased himself to the edge of the container and looked outside. His movements were calm, almost economical, betraying years of military discipline. "They are leaving." "How can you tell?" "They came to kill witnesses, not fight a battle." He stepped onto the loading platform. The inspection bay looked like a storm had swept through it. Customs officers were dragging injured colleagues behind parked trucks while security personnel shouted conflicting instructions into radios. 2 black SUVs were already disappearing through a service gate before anyone attempted to stop them. "They knew exactly where to go," Awa said. "They also knew exactly when you would open that crate." The thought settled over her like cold rain. Someone had known about the inspection before it happened. Someone inside the port. She turned toward Momadou. The customs officer stood frozen beside the shattered crate, his face drained of color. "I never told anyone," he said before she spoke. "I swear." "I believe you." "You do. Because if you'd warned them, you'd already be dead." His expression made it painfully clear that he had just realized the same thing. Awa looked back at the painting. It remained untouched. The attackers had ignored an artwork worth millions. They had come only for the people standing beside it. That bothered her far more. Less than an hour later, the stolen painting rested inside a secure evidence room overlooking the harbor. The room contained only 3 people. Awa, Idrissa, and Colonel Samba Ndiaye, commander of port security. The colonel listened without interrupting as Awa described the attack. When she finished, he folded his hands together and regarded the painting in silence. "This shipment disappears into police custody immediately," he said. "I'd like a complete inventory first," Awa replied. "No." She looked at him. "No. The fewer people who know what's inside these containers, the better." Idrissa had remained silent until now. "I agree." Awa turned toward him. "You agree remarkably quickly. I've seen operations like this before." "Where?" "In places that stopped asking questions." His answer carried enough weight to end further discussion. "For now." The colonel's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed. "I have to take this." He stepped into the corridor, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was unexpectedly intimate. For the first time since the shooting, Awa and Idrissa stood alone. She realized she still knew almost nothing about him. "You really didn't know," she said quietly. "No." "You looked surprised." "I was." "You could be lying." "I could." She studied his face. His composure had returned, but it no longer felt rehearsed. It felt earned. Years of controlling emotion until it became second nature. "You don't trust me," he observed. "I've known you for less than 2 hours. And you work for the woman whose foundation imported stolen artwork." He gave a faint smile. "I was hoping for something less logical." Against her better judgment, Awa almost smiled back. "Almost. I investigate facts. And people. Usually. What have you concluded?" She met his eyes. "That you're either exactly who you appear to be." She paused. "Or something completely different." He laughed softly. The sound surprised both of them. "You know," he said, "that's the nicest thing anyone has said to me all year." She shook her head. "I wasn't complimenting you." "I know." Their eyes held for a moment longer than either intended. There it was again. That inexplicable current passing silently between them. Not trust. Not yet. But something equally difficult to ignore. The colonel returned 10 minutes later. His expression had hardened. "The Foundation has reported the shipment stolen." Awa frowned. "Stolen?" "They claim criminals substituted fake documentation before the vessel reached Dakar." "That's impossible." "I know." Idrissa looked at the colonel. "Who called?" "Marième herself." Neither of them spoke. The silence carried its own meaning. If Marième Fall had orchestrated the smuggling, reporting the shipment made no sense. Unless Awa felt the pieces shift. "She knows." The colonel nodded. "Knows what?" "That the shipment has been compromised." Idrissa finished the thought. "And she's distancing herself before investigators can connect it to her." Awa walked back toward the painting. Something had bothered her from the moment she first saw it. Not the artwork. The frame. She lifted it carefully. It was heavier than it should have been. "Help me." Idrissa came to her side. Close enough that she caught the clean scent of cedar and sea salt lingering on his jacket. Without speaking, they examined the back together. His shoulder brushed hers. Neither moved away. "There," he said. One corner had been repaired recently. The nails were newer than the rest. Idrissa produced a pocket knife. "You always carry that?" "I found life rewards preparation." He carefully lifted the backing. A folded waterproof envelope slipped onto the table. Neither of them touched it immediately. Awa looked at him. "You first. You found it. You opened it. You don't trust me." "I've already established that." A smile tugged briefly at the corner of his mouth. Together, they unfolded the envelope. Inside was no money. No certificate. No ownership documents. Only a handwritten list. Dates. Ship names. Container numbers. Ports across 3 continents. Beside each shipment was a single handwritten initial. At the very bottom appeared one final entry. Dakar. Tomorrow. Underneath, just one letter. M. Awa's pulse quickened. "This isn't an inventory." "No. It's a schedule." Idrissa's face lost what little color remained. "And tomorrow's shipment hasn't arrived yet." Before either of them could say another word, the lights in the evidence room went out. Complete darkness swallowed the room. Somewhere beyond the door, someone screamed. Then came the unmistakable sound of a heavy security lock disengaging. Someone was opening the evidence room from the outside. Darkness transformed the evidence room into a maze of breathing, instinct, and memory. The emergency lighting failed to activate. That was the first thing Idrissa noticed. The second was the faint scrape of shoes outside the door. Someone had disabled the building before entering it. He reached for Awa's wrist, finding it almost immediately in the darkness. Don't move. Her fingers tightened around his. I'm not planning to. The metallic click of the security lock echoed through the room. The door began to open. Idrissa pulled Awa behind a row of evidence cabinets just as narrow beams of torchlight swept across the floor. 3 men entered. Not customs officers. Not police. Professional. One closed the door behind them while another moved directly toward the table where the painting had rested only moments earlier. It's gone, he muttered. Search. The room filled with the quiet efficiency of men who had rehearsed this before. Idrissa leaned close enough for his lips to brush Awa's ear. Can you reach the alarm? She followed the direction of his gaze. A small emergency switch sat beside the opposite wall. 20 feet away. Between them and the intruders. No. I can distract them. You'll be shot. Possibly. She turned toward him despite the darkness. You say that as though it's an inconvenience. He smiled faintly. It usually is. Even now. Even here. She wanted to laugh. Instead she found herself studying the outline of his face, barely visible in the weak glow of a flashlight passing through the room. There was something absurd about noticing the strength of his jaw while armed men searched for them. Yet she noticed it anyway. He looked back at her. What? Nothing. You were looking. So were you? A whispered curse interrupted them. One of the intruders had reached the empty table. The envelope is missing. Good. Awa had slipped it into her jacket moments before the lights went out, almost without thinking. Instinct had made the decision before reason could. Now that instinct might be the only reason they were still alive. The leader spoke quietly. They are still here. Idrissa's expression hardened. We are leaving. Before she could protest, he picked up a steel evidence trolley and shoved it across the polished floor. The crashing metal exploded through the room. Every flashlight swung toward the noise. At the same instant Idrissa seized Awa's hand and ran. The first shot shattered glass behind them. The second punched into a filing cabinet. They burst through the doorway before the attackers realized what had happened. The corridor beyond lay in darkness except for the pale glow of exit signs. Left. She followed without hesitation. Behind them came shouting. Then footsteps. Fast. Very fast. They reached an emergency stairwell and descended 4 flights almost blindly. By the time they emerged onto the loading docks, the afternoon sun hit them like another world. Sirens wailed across the harbor. Police vehicles were finally arriving. Too late. Always just too late. Neither of them slowed until they reached the shelter of a disused warehouse overlooking the docks. Both were breathing hard. For several moments neither spoke. Finally Awa leaned against a concrete pillar and laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because she was still alive. Idrissa watched her with quiet amusement. People usually cry. I've never been conventional. I noticed. She looked at him. His tie had disappeared somewhere during the escape. His jacket hung open, revealing a shoulder holster dusted with splinters from the shattered evidence room. A small cut crossed his forehead. Without thinking, she reached up. You've been bleeding. His eyes met hers as her fingertips brushed the cut. It was a tiny wound. Barely worth mentioning. Yet neither of them seemed capable of looking away. You should clean it, she said softly. I probably should. She still hadn't moved her hand. Neither had he. The sounds of the harbor faded into the background. For one suspended moment there were no gunmen. No stolen paintings. Only the awareness of standing far too close to someone she had intended not to trust. His voice came almost as a whisper. Awa. She realized what she was doing. Quickly she stepped back. I was checking the cut. I know. You seemed about to say something. I changed my mind. She folded her arms. Wise decision. It didn't feel wise. For the first time that day, she blushed. She turned away before he could notice. He noticed anyway. The envelope lay between them on an old wooden workbench. Awa unfolded it again. The list made even less sense now. There are 23 shipments. Idrissa nodded. Over 4 years. Everyone connected to a different port. She traced the initials beside each entry. A. L. C. K. No names. Just letters. Then she reached the final page. Her breathing slowed. There are coordinates. Idrissa leaned beside her. Not over her. Beside her. Giving her room while remaining close enough that their shoulders touched. The coordinates pointed to a single location. Inside the car. He frowned. I know this place. You do. It's one of Mariem's restoration workshops. The gallery. No. His voice became quieter. The original one. A building that officially no longer existed. An hour later they stood across the street from an abandoned colonial warehouse near the edge of the old port district. Paint peeled from its walls. Broken shutters hung crooked above empty windows. A faded sign still read. For restoration services. Closed 8 years earlier. At least officially. It looks deserted, Awa said. It should. They watched for several minutes. Nothing moved. No vehicles. No guards. No lights. Then a delivery truck rolled slowly around the corner. The rear gate opened automatically. The truck disappeared inside. The gate closed again. Neither of them spoke. Awa looked sideways at Idrissa. You knew about this building. I knew Marième bought it years ago. But not that she still used it. No. She studied his face. If you've worked for her for 6 years. I know. How much don't you know? His answer came without hesitation. I'm beginning to think almost everything. The admission carried no defensiveness. Only disappointment. Awa believed him. That frightened her more than if he had lied. Because if Idrissa Kane had been kept in the dark, Marième Fall had been hiding her real business from the man she trusted most. Awa looked back at the warehouse. One shipment had already arrived. Tomorrow's was still coming. Whatever Marième was building had nearly reached its end. And if they waited for the police, the evidence would disappear before morning. She took a slow breath. We are going inside. Idrissa looked at her. I was hoping you'd say that. She smiled despite herself. You know that's a terrible idea. The worst. Their eyes met. Neither of them suggested walking away. Together, they crossed the empty street toward the silent warehouse. Neither noticed the small security camera hidden beneath the rusted roofline. Inside another room, a monitor flickered to life. Marième Fall watched them approach. Then she smiled. They've found it, she said calmly. Prepare the harbor. She switched off the screen. Tomorrow, she whispered, they'll come to me themselves. The warehouse had once restored carved doors, antique furniture, and religious paintings from across West Africa. At least, that was what the faded sign still claimed. Time had weathered the walls, salt had eaten into the metal shutters, and weeds had pushed through cracks in the concrete yard, creating the perfect disguise for a place everyone believed had been abandoned. Yet the truck that had entered only minutes earlier had vanished without leaving so much as an open loading bay behind. The building was pretending to be dead, and someone had invested considerable effort in making the deception convincing. Awa remained in the shadow of an adjoining building, studying every window before allowing herself to move. There should be guards, she murmured. A shipment valuable enough to kill for wouldn't be left unattended. They're here, Idrissa replied quietly. We just haven't seen them yet. She glanced sideways at him. How do you know? Because if I were protecting this place, I'd want us to believe exactly what we're believing now. She almost smiled. Which is? That it's empty. They crossed the street separately, converging near a rusting service entrance instead of approaching together. Idrissa tested the padlock with gentle pressure, then crouched to inspect the hinges. Before he could speak, Awa pointed upward. The camera. It was barely visible beneath a corroded drainpipe, disguised by years of accumulated dust. Idrissa followed her gaze and nodded slowly. They wanted us to find the building. The realization settled between them with uncomfortable clarity. Whoever controlled the operation already knew they possessed the shipping schedule. They had not simply anticipated pursuit. They had prepared for it. So why let us come? Awa asked. Either because they want us dead. He paused, his eyes narrowing as another possibility surfaced. Or because they want to know how much we've discovered before tomorrow. The second explanation was worse. It meant they were no longer investigators. They were bait. Without another word, Idrissa slipped a slim metal tool into the lock. A soft click followed almost immediately. He pushed the door inward just enough to listen. No voices. No footsteps. Only the distant hum of electrical equipment somewhere deeper inside the building. The smell surprised Awa first. Fresh varnish. New timber. Climate-controlled air. Nothing about the interior matched the neglected exterior. Motion-sensitive lights awakened one after another as they stepped inside, revealing polished concrete floors, modern shelving, conservation equipment, and rows of wooden crates almost identical to the ones they had inspected at the port. It was less an abandoned warehouse than a fully functioning restoration laboratory concealed inside a forgotten shell. They've renovated the entire building, she whispered. They've hidden it in plain sight. Awa moved carefully between the crates, photographing serial numbers while resisting the temptation to open anything prematurely. Each shipment bore museum references from different countries, but the labels were inconsistent. Some identified works supposedly traveling to exhibitions in Europe. Others referenced restoration projects that did not exist. Every document appeared genuine until compared against another. Individually, each crate looked legitimate. Together, they contradicted one another. Look at this, she said. Idrissa joined her beside a long worktable covered with conservation records. At first glance, the paperwork appeared ordinary, but Awa's finger rested on a sequence of shipping dates. They are impossible. He frowned. The same painting arrives in Dakar 3 weeks after records show it leaving for New York. His expression changed. So the artwork isn't being sold? No. It's being replaced. She nodded slowly. The originals disappear. Perfect copies continue traveling the world. For several seconds neither spoke. It was elegantly simple. Museums displayed masterpieces they believed were authentic while the originals quietly vanished into private collections. No dramatic thefts. No smashed display cases. No international headlines. Just paperwork, restoration, and patience. Marième Fall had not built a smuggling empire. She had built an invisible one. The discovery should have filled Awa with satisfaction. Instead, she found herself watching Idrissa. He stood motionless beside the documents, disappointment etched across his face with an honesty she had not expected. He was not mourning the loss of a job. He was mourning the collapse of someone he had believed worthy of loyalty. You trusted her, Awa said gently. I respected her. That's different. It was supposed to be. He laughed once, though there was no humor in it. For 6 years I believed I was protecting a woman preserving African heritage. Instead, he looked around the warehouse. I've been protecting the greatest art thief on the continent. Awa wanted to tell him none of it was his fault. Instead, she reached for his hand. She hadn't planned to. The gesture happened before she could overthink it. His fingers closed around hers almost immediately, warm and steady despite everything surrounding them. Neither of them spoke. They simply stood there for a quiet moment in the middle of a criminal empire, finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. When she finally withdrew her hand, she noticed the smallest smile on his face. What? You held my hand. I was being supportive. I didn't say I minded. I wasn't asking whether you minded. No. No. He stepped a little closer, not enough to crowd her, only enough that lowering her voice became necessary. I've spent all day trying to convince myself you're impossible. And I'm beginning to think impossible isn't necessarily a bad thing. She felt warmth rise into her cheeks and looked away before he could enjoy the effect too much. You have terrible timing. I've been told. A faint vibration interrupted the moment. Idrissa reached instinctively for his phone before remembering he had switched it off hours earlier. The sound hadn't come from him. It came from somewhere beneath the floor. Both of them froze. Again. Awa knelt beside one of the shelving units where the vibration had originated. Hidden beneath it was a narrow ventilation grill. She removed it carefully and peered into the darkness below. A staircase. Concrete. Newly built. She looked back at Idrissa. There's another level. He nodded. The real warehouse. The underground space stretched far beyond the footprint of the building above. They descended cautiously, each step revealing another row of lights until the entire chamber unfolded before them. It was breathtaking. Hundreds of paintings rested in climate-controlled racks. Marble sculptures stood wrapped in protective fabric. Ancient manuscripts filled secure cabinets. Gold ceremonial masks, bronze statues, carved ivory, rare maps, and priceless religious icons occupied shelves that disappeared into the distance. Some pieces belonged to Europe. Others to Asia. Many unmistakably belonged to Africa. Awa turned slowly. This is impossible. No, Idrissa said quietly. It's a private museum. At the center of the chamber stood a single easel. Unlike everything else, the painting displayed upon it had not been wrapped or hidden. Marième wanted it seen. It depicted a harbor at sunset. The Port of Dakar. The artist's signature belonged to one of Senegal's greatest painters, believed to have been destroyed in a fire nearly 30 years earlier. A small envelope rested against the frame. Awa opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. You finally found my collection. Now come and watch me complete it. Tomorrow. Sunrise. Pier 12. There was no signature. None was necessary. Awa folded the note carefully. So tomorrow is the final shipment. Idrissa nodded. No. She looked at him. It isn't the final shipment. What do you mean? He stared at the painting for another long moment before answering. It's the final exchange. The words hung heavily in the silent chamber. Marième Fall wasn't waiting for another masterpiece. She was waiting for something she considered more valuable than every treasure surrounding them. The only question left was what? Pier 12 lay at the far edge of the commercial harbor, beyond the passenger terminal and the brightly painted fishing boats that crowded Dakar's shoreline each morning. By 4:30, the city was still wrapped in darkness, but the port had already begun to stir. Engines rumbled behind high fences, floodlights washed the cranes in pale gold, and the Atlantic struck the concrete barriers with a slow, relentless rhythm. From the roof of an abandoned administration building, Awa watched a refrigerated cargo vessel approach the pier without navigation lights, its black hull moving through the water with the silence of a shadow. Idrissa lay beside her behind a low parapet, studying the vessel through binoculars. They had sent copies of the warehouse photographs and shipping records to Connor and Diaya before leaving, but neither of them knew whether the evidence would reach the authorities before Mariem's influence buried it. The police had promised officers at sunrise. Idrissa had heard promises like that before. They were useful things, promises, especially when someone needed time to disappear. "The ship is early," he said. "Or we are late." His eyes shifted toward her. "We are 40 minutes early. Marième has been ahead of us since the first container. That does not make us late. It makes her irritating." Despite the cold knot in her stomach, Awa smiled. The past 24 hours had altered something between them. Danger had stripped away the polite distance of strangers and replaced it with a familiarity that felt reckless, accelerated, and entirely real. She knew the slight narrowing of his eyes when he distrusted a room, the way his voice softened when he was worried, and the fact that he used humor only when circumstances were at their worst. He knew she counted exits without realizing it, touched her necklace when she was thinking, and hated being told to remain behind anyone. They had learned each other quickly because neither had been given the luxury of time. "You should leave before the ship docks," he said. The smile vanished. "No, Awa. I have the records, the photographs, and the expertise to identify whatever is being exchanged. You have a gun and an unhealthy belief that every problem can be solved by standing between it and a bullet. We both have a role." His mouth tightened, but the irritation in his face could not conceal the fear beneath it. "I cannot protect you if everything goes wrong." She turned fully toward him. "Everything has already gone wrong." "That is not what I mean." "I know." For a moment he said nothing. The harbor lights caught the edge of his face, revealing an exhaustion he had hidden well until now. When he reached for her, it was not abrupt or uncertain. His hand settled against the side of her neck, his thumb resting just beneath her jaw, and the tenderness of the gesture affected her more deeply than the gunfire, the chases, or the secrets had managed to. "I have spent years walking into dangerous places," he said quietly. "This is the first time I have been afraid because someone else followed me." Awa placed her hand over his. "I did not follow you." "No. I walked beside you." His gaze dropped to her mouth, and the air changed with a force neither of them could pretend not to feel. The kiss began carefully, almost as though they were both testing whether it belonged to the world they had entered. Then his other hand drew her closer, and caution dissolved. It was not soft, but it was not desperate either. It carried everything they had refused to say, the distrust that had become reliance, the fear that had become protectiveness, and the attraction that had been present from the moment he entered the inspection bay. When they parted, Awa remained close enough to feel his breath against her face. "That was badly timed," she whispered. "Terribly. We may be about to confront a criminal empire." "I know. You still look pleased with yourself." "I am trying to enjoy one success before the morning deteriorates." Below them, the vessel reached the pier. A convoy of black vehicles appeared almost immediately, entering through a gate that should have been locked. Men in dark clothing spread across the loading area while a crane lifted a single steel crate from the ship's deck. Unlike the wooden cases in the warehouse, this container was small, reinforced, and guarded as though it held a head of state. Then Marième Fall stepped from the central vehicle. She wore white. The choice was theatrical, almost insulting. While armed men surrounded her and stolen treasures waited beneath the city, she appeared immaculate beneath the harbor lights, composed enough to attend a charity gala. She watched the crate descend, then turned toward the administration building where Awa and Idrissa were concealed. "She knows we're here," Awa murmured. Marième raised one hand. A spotlight snapped on. The roof flooded with light. Idrissa moved in front of Awa as gunmen emerged from both stairwells, cutting off every exit. Their weapons were drawn, but they did not fire. A loudspeaker crackled below. Idrissa, Mariem's voice carried across the pier, calm and almost affectionate. Bring Madame Diop down. I would prefer not to damage the only person in Dakar capable of authenticating what I am about to sell. Awa stared at the steel crate. The final exchange was not another stolen painting. Marième needed an expert witness. She needed Awa. Idrissa's body went rigid beside her. Marième continued, come willingly, and you both live alive. Refuse, and the harbor will remember this morning for a very long time. The gunman advanced. Idrissa looked at Awa, and she understood the decision before he spoke. They had finally discovered Mariem's last move. Now they would have to walk directly into it. The story concludes by bringing the single central act to its resolution while paying off the relationship between Awa and Idrissa. They descended the stairs together without speaking. The decision had not been made aloud. Neither of them had proposed surrender, and neither believed Marième intended to honor her promise. But remaining on the rooftop would only delay the inevitable. The building was surrounded, every exit covered, and every second increased the likelihood that whatever lay inside the reinforced crate would disappear forever. As they stepped onto the concrete of Pier 12, the armed men closed in but kept a respectful distance. Marième Fall had already won enough not to need theatrics. She watched them approach with the relaxed confidence of someone accustomed to controlling every conversation before it began. I wondered how long it would take, she said. You expected us, Awa replied. I expected Idrissa. Mariem's eyes shifted toward him, and for the first time a hint of genuine disappointment crossed her face. I did not expect him to change sides. I didn't, he answered evenly. You did. She smiled almost sadly. No. I simply changed ambitions. Behind her, the crane lowered the reinforced crate onto the dock with remarkable care. 4 technicians immediately surrounded it, checking temperature gauges and electronic seals. Awa's attention never left the container. What's inside? Marième followed her gaze. The only painting I have ever wanted. You already have hundreds. I have investments. Her smile widened. This one is history. She walked to the crate herself and rested a hand lightly against the steel casing. Do you know why museums fascinate people? Because they convince us that history belongs to everyone. It doesn't. History belongs to whoever possesses it. With a nod, she signaled one of the technicians. The electronic locks disengaged. The steel door swung open. Inside stood a climate-controlled glass enclosure. Within it rested a single canvas wrapped in protective linen. Marième carefully folded the covering back. Even before Awa saw the signature, she felt her breath catch. It was a long-lost masterpiece by one of Senegal's greatest 19th-century painters, a work scholars had searched for over a century. Entire books had been written about its disappearance. Some believed it had been destroyed during colonial conflict. Others insisted it had never existed outside private correspondence. It had existed. And now it stood less than 3 meters away. You found it, Awa whispered. Marième nodded with unmistakable satisfaction. I bought it 3 months ago. You stole it. I purchased it from the man who stole it. She shrugged lightly. I consider that progress. Awa stepped closer despite the rifles surrounding her. You don't intend to keep it? Marième looked almost amused. Of course not. The answer surprised everyone except her. I have a buyer arriving in 20 minutes. Everything suddenly made sense. The copied masterpieces. The restoration workshops. The hidden warehouse. Marième had never collected art because she loved it. She had collected it because someone wealthier always wanted it. She was not building a museum. She was building the most exclusive catalog in the world. You needed me to authenticate it, Awa said. I needed someone whose opinion no serious collector would question. And if I refuse? Mariam's expression remained perfectly calm. You won't. Why are you so certain? Because if you lie, the buyer walks away. She tilted her head slightly. And then I simply shoot Idrissa. Silence settled across the pier. Idrissa never looked at Mariam. His eyes remained on Awa. She understood exactly what he was asking. Not with words. With trust. The same trust that had grown between them one dangerous hour at a time. Awa took a slow breath and walked toward the painting. Every eye followed her. She examined the canvas without rushing. The pigments. The crackle. The varnish. The stretcher. The signature. Every detail confirmed what Mariam believed. It was authentic. Painfully authentic. She turned back. It isn't genuine. Several technicians looked up in surprise. Mariam didn't. She merely smiled. You disappoint me. Awa continued calmly. The pigments are correct. The canvas is correct. The restoration is flawless. She paused deliberately. But the lower left corner was repaired with modern Belgian linen. That material wasn't manufactured until decades after the artist died. The buyer's convoy had just entered the pier. Black luxury sedans rolled silently toward them before stopping beside the dock. An elderly European collector stepped out with two advisors. You've heard the assessment, Awa said loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is an exceptional copy. The collector's expression darkened immediately. Mariam's eyes never left Awa. You are lying? No. You've examined the painting for less than 2 minutes. I've examined enough. The collector approached the canvas himself. His advisors began inspecting it with portable lights. Minutes stretched. No one spoke. Then one advisor frowned. There is a repair. The second advisor bent closer. I hadn't noticed that. Neither had Mariam. She looked at the corner for the first time. Her confidence faltered. Only slightly. Only for a heartbeat. But Idrissa saw it. So did I, he said quietly. Mariam turned. What? You looked. His hand moved. The pistol appeared almost faster than sight. One shot shattered the floodlight above the dock. Darkness exploded across the pier. The second shot destroyed the control panel operating the crane. Alarms screamed. Workers scattered. Police sirens erupted from beyond the harbor gates. Colonel Ndiaye had arrived. Dozens of vehicles burst through the security barriers, surrounding the pier from 3 directions. Gunmen hesitated. That hesitation ended the fight. Within seconds, weapons struck the ground one after another. Mariam stood perfectly still. She looked first at the arriving officers. Then at Idrissa. Finally at Awa. You altered the report, she said quietly. Awa shook her head. I delayed the truth. Mariam frowned. The repair. It exists. So the painting is authentic. The buyer stared in disbelief. So why? Awa smiled faintly. Because I only needed you to hesitate. Mariam closed her eyes. For the first time since they had met, she looked defeated. Not because she had lost the painting. Because she had underestimated 2 people who had learned to trust each other. 3 weeks later, the Port of Dakar felt like an entirely different place. Investigations continued across several countries. Museums began recovering stolen works. Private collectors quietly surrendered paintings they suddenly preferred not to explain. The hidden warehouse beneath the restoration workshop became one of the largest recoveries of cultural heritage in modern African history. Awa stood once again on the balcony overlooking the harbor. Ships continued arriving. Containers continued moving. The port looked exactly as it always had. Only now she knew that some victories left no visible mark. Footsteps approached behind her. She smiled before turning. "You've stopped trying to surprise me. I've accepted that it's impossible." Idrissa handed her 2 cups of coffee. She accepted one. "What happens now?" he asked. She looked across the Atlantic. "I suppose I go back to investigating cargo. And I suppose I look for honest work." She laughed softly. "I know someone who could use a security consultant." "Do you?" "The investigator can be difficult." "I've heard." "And impossible." "I've heard that too." He stepped closer. So, would the investigator have dinner with the former naval officer?" She pretended to consider it for several seconds. "Only if he promises not to get us shot." "I can't promise that." She laughed, slipped her hand into his, and together they watched another ship enter Dakar harbor, knowing that some journeys began only after the danger had finally ended.
Thank you for listening. Tell me, which African country would you like the next Mafia story to be based in, and why? Drop your answers in the comments and I will take it from there. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere in Africa, another story is already unfolding.